Season 3 is
Yes.
coming up, and can you tell us, for our readers, they obviously haven't seen anything yet, what can they expect to see in Season 3?
Certainly much more action than we've ever done in any of the seasons before. The whole season takes place over a very compressed timeline over the course of 1 or 2 months, and it's centered around the Siege of Otranto, which is when the Ottomans invaded Italy. And so it's basically a war story. It's very tense, and the season, I would say, the storyline, it's about, Da Vinci's always been afraid that his inventions would be misused. And so it's one thing to have, a prototype machine gun be used to kill a dozen people like he did in the first season. But this season, he's watching destruction be wrought on a massive scale. So hundreds, even thousands of people are being killed. And he's really having to wrestle with what it is that he's created.
He seems to also have this tension, though, between getting wrapped up in the process of creation and then getting to the end of that and then considering, well, now how will this be applied? Do you think that's a common problem that people who are geniuses like that face?
I do think it's a common problem. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I would say even as a creative person, sometimes that happens. Is you go into this fugue, this pure creative process, and you create something, and you don't always really think about kind of the implications or how it'll be received once it's out loose in the world, because then it's not yours anymore, then it becomes everyone's. And I've had that experience even when I've been working on a television show or been working on like a really big movie. It becomes everyone's, and it's not just sort of caught in the pure space of your one mind. And that's something that I think inventors, creators like Da Vinci and a lot of other famous scientists, really wrestled with.
And what is some of your source material that you looked at for this season? Because I know you do try to kind of follow along the realistic or the historical timeline for Da Vinci.
There were a lot of biographies. There were a lot of accounts of this particular battle, the Siege of Otranto, so that was helpful. There's a new character that we introduced called Gedik, who was the leader of the Ottoman forces. So in this case, it's nice because we've got some first-person accounts of these events.
And this is the final season, correct?
This is the final season. We were going back and forth whether or not it should be the final season. It's the final season, but it doesn't end on a cliffhanger. It doesn't sort of drop off a cliff. There's a proper closure and a proper ending that I think the fans of the show will appreciate and enjoy.
So logistically, how did that work? Because I had read that you had finished shooting the season before the decision was made to stop after season 3. So had you come to kind of a natural stopping point in the storyline, or did you have more ideas of what you wanted to see potentially in a season 4?
Well, it happened 2 ways. The first way, we had come to a natural caesura, and our plan for season 4 would have occurred about 14 years later anyway. It would have taken place during the Bonfire of the Vanities. But as it happens, the way that we do the production is we always build in a couple of weeks of additional photography after principal photography ends, a couple months after. So the decision happened during those couple months while we were editing, and then we filmed for about 10 more days and wrote some new scenes that I'd always intended to use whenever the show would end. So we had the ability to kind of course correct, and it wasn't too difficult, actually.
And I also read that the season is going to be released all at once, which is different. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I think television consumption is just changing, and I mean, let's be honest, Netflix were the first people to do that, and when it started happening, I thought that would be crazy, but now that I think about it, I watch most of my shows on DVR, and my wife and I, or on demand. We binge watch most of our shows, and so it just seemed like it was the right decision to make. A lot of places are starting to do it, so it'll be an experiment.
Do you feel like that is kind of a challenge for a show that has, this higher production value and it's kind of more grand on, the scope and the scale of what you're trying to accomplish in a season? Do you feel like that is something that's served by releasing it all at once, or is there something to be said for waiting to see what happens till next week?
I mean, there are pros and cons to each of it. I mean, when you have a lot of production value, like we do on our show, the show takes a really long time to produce. So, you know, one of the negatives is that you have to wait for all the episodes to be completed, which is one of the reasons why we aired, you know, the lead time was longer than it was in previous seasons. You know, we had to tack on another 2.5 months because when you're airing sequentially, you can be finishing up the latter episodes as you're airing the first episodes. But I don't know. I have to be honest. I mean, I binge watch almost everything these days. I mean, I usually watch things in at least 2 or 3s. So it just seems like that's the way people want to consume now.
And you mentioned that there was, you know, a couple new characters coming. Who else can fans look forward to seeing this season who we haven't met yet?
Well, there's a mystery character that will be coming in around episode 5 named Sophia, who will figure prominently in Leonardo's life. The leader of the Turkish army is a historical character named Gedek, who's very interesting. We'll get to meet, of course, Leonardo's mother, Katerina, who appeared in the final moments of season 2. Those are sort of 3 of the big ones.
And what was it about Da Vinci in particular that made you want to do a show about his life?
I was interested in doing a show that took place in a historical setting. I'd never done that before. And I'd always had a fascination with him as a child. I was aware that he'd painted and whatnot, but when I learned that he invented the helicopter and the machine gun and the tank and all sorts of flying machine, crazy things like that, he just seemed like this mythologized, bigger-than-life character. And I just couldn't believe that no one had ever really wrapped a TV show around him. I work with a lot of superheroes, and he was kind of a real-life superhero.
Well, and I think most people have this image of him as already elderly.
Yes.
You know, so this
Well, that was another issue. Is he had a really interesting life, and he wasn't this. Yeah, people think of him as this Merlin-like figure with his long, flowing beard. It's a self-portrait that he did when he was 67 or something like that. But you know, he was a great athlete, a great swordsman, great horseback rider. By all accounts, he liked practical jokes. He was a flamboyant dresser, things like that. He even published a book of jokes, which is I have a copy of. By today's standards, they're kind of odd, but at one point he even opened a restaurant with Botticelli, which I thought was pretty funny.
That would be something to see.
Yeah, and apparently it closed down after a year because they spent too much time on the presentation and not how the food actually tasted. It took too long to make the stuff.
I would see that over them eating all their profits.
Yeah.
So now that you've done this kind of big historical show, is that something you want to do again?
Yeah, absolutely. I love television. I love serialized television. I'm in the process of developing a lot more shows. I would love to dip into a different historical setting at some point. I've got some things that are hopefully will come out in a year or so. We'll see.
What's another historical setting that you think you'd like to explore?
Another historical setting. I think it'd be cool to do something during World War II. Aside from the HBO stuff, it's not an era that I've seen a lot of stuff done. I've always been interested in the OSS.
Yeah, different angles we're used to seeing the same kind of thing. You always see the German documentaries only.
Exactly.
And there's a lot more to the war than
Oh, yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Do you have a message for the fans for what they can look forward to?
I hope the fans enjoy the final season. We had a hell of a time making it. We've had a blast making the show. It was so much fun, and we're so appreciative of the people that have watched the show and enjoyed it, of the emails and letters and fan art that we get. It's really gratifying.